Gerard's going to be talking to us tonight. We're going to do a bit of a question and answer. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask him, and then Gerard is going to give me the answer to those questions. So we're going to kick it off. My first question for you is, how did you become a Christian? What's your sort of backstory?
Right. Okay. So my story of how I became a Christian is actually quite unremarkable in many ways. Before I became a Christian, I'd never robbed a bank. I had never got drunk. I'd never taken drugs. I'd never gone toe-to-toe in a bar for a fight with anyone, all of which shouldn't be surprising because I was 7 years old when I became a Christian. At 7 years old, I began to lift in a metaphor from the Bible, I began my race, if you like. That said, I have veered off over the years on my race. I have veered off the racetrack, but I hope that when I am 87, if I'm still here, that I'll still be running that race. I've said before here at the front, actually, that it's really important to start that race, but actually it's even more important to finish it as well. There's no point in starting the race if you're not going to finish it. Now, my background, Sean, is that, like you, I was born and raised in a Christian family. My mum and dad were both sincere and committed Christians. I didn't reject that background. I didn't despise it. I didn't rebel against it. Actually, I embraced it. And over the years, I've actually come to believe that it gave me a bit of a head start in life, really. So anyway, back to when I was 7, when it all began. My mum and dad were involved at a church that ran an evangelistic campaign every couple of years. They'd roll up to a piece of spare ground at the end of the estate that I lived on. They would pitch a marquee tent, and they would invite a speaker to come and do a 3-week evangelistic mission to the area. The churches would all leaflet the area to invite people from the community to come in. And I was only 7, but I snuck into one of the youth meetings. I'd gone along to some of the children's work. And although I can't tell you everything that Peter Brandon, who was the evangelist, said that night, what I do remember is coming away with an overwhelming sense of injustice. And that was that this man, this perfect man, Jesus Christ, who had done no wrong, who had only done good, was taken by sinful men and crucified and nailed to a cross. And I remember coming home and in the kitchen, my mum and dad scooping me up. And I remember the night really clearly, breaking my heart over the injustice of this perfect man, Jesus, who did nothing but love people, being nailed to a cross. And that was the beginning of this race that I talk about. Of course, over the years, many things have happened. When I was 15, I was introduced to someone called the Holy Spirit and the spiritual gifts that he gives for the building up of the church. And that was interesting because I had to undo a lot of what I inherited from my upbringing, some misunderstandings about the Holy Spirit and his gifts. And that did take a few years. That wasn't something that happened overnight. So if I can urge you not to make the error that I made in believing that the spiritual gifts were limited to the early church. That took some undoing and rewiring in my brain over the years. At 22, I was baptized as a believer by full immersion. My dad conducted the service. And my mum and dad gave me this Bible, which I still carry around to this day, however many years ago that was. That was in July 1988. And my dad, in particular, imparted a love of reading this Bible and the importance of doing so, and a strong conviction that it really was the Word of God. 3 months after my baptism, I went off to uni, and I really struggled at university. The work was so hard, really difficult, and I really struggled with homesickness. I missed my family, my friends, and my youth group. So I really, really struggled. But a new experience was beginning in my life it started to unfold gradually. I found that without having all of that support around me that I had been so used to, that I began to depend upon God in a way that I had never done before and would never have done so had I not gone off to uni. Actually, since then, I've discovered that you don't even know if you've got a faith until something goes wrong, or if you have it tested, because it's easy to maintain that you have a faith until something happens that seems to contradict it in some way. Anyway, when I was at uni, my faith deepened, my prayer life gathered more conviction, I grew in my knowledge of this, and looking back, I can see that difficult time for me was a time of preparation and not a time of desolation. I survived uni, I came back, and I got stuck in as a helper at the group, as it used to be called. That's my backstory. That's how I became a Christian.
Yeah, brilliant. My next question is, how did you come to lead the group?
How did I come to lead the group? Okay, so first of all, I think I need to explain to those who might not know what the group is. The group, as it was called back in my day, provided this really safe and welcoming environment for young people to come and hear and inquire about the good news of Jesus Christ. It wasn't a typical Methodist youth group. There was certainly no table tennis tables in sight. And it was gently but unapologetically evangelistic in its mission and its aim. So it had a mission statement back in that time, and it was to win young people for Jesus Christ. Of course, the latest incarnation of the group is what is now called your Sunday night young adults, who are, of course, hosting this service tonight. And I went to the group when I was 13 years old. In fact, I remember a discussion group in this very room when I was 13. And I went because someone invited me. I say that because I became utterly sort of taken with that phrase. I came because someone invited me. And so taken with it was I that I had it painted on a huge roll of wallpaper that we used to unfold every week when I was the leader, and with blue tack, stick it on the wall at eye level where they used to sit to remind those who sat there that they came because someone had invited them. And it was the importance of inviting other people to be a part of what I had come to love and be a part of. I came because someone invited me. So I felt they should do the same, that they should invite other people. Friendship, evangelism. Having been invited on that night when I was 13 in a discussion group about I was told I was too young and I couldn't come again the following week until I was 14, which I did, and I came back when I was 14. And little did I know that night that for the next 30-something years, about 32 years, that is what I was going to do pretty much every Sunday evening because of my experience that I loved from the very start of being a part of the group. Yeah, it was cliquey. The group has always been cliquey. We're never going to get away from that. People merge into their friendship groups, but I got over that, and I got into my own friendship groups, and I probably, behind the scenes, had people saying of me that I was cliquey. I said earlier that when I came back from uni, I joined the youth group as a helper. I wasn't the leader at that time. Lloyd here was the leader. And then in early 1997, Lloyd, you stepped down from the youth group, and I became part of a leadership team of 5. So me plus 4 others started leading the group. And over the next 3 years, between 97 and 2000, those other leaders, at least 3 of them, stepped down from the group. And then one day, the 4th leader came up to me and he said, Gerard, I'm thinking of stepping down too. That was a day I'd been absolutely dreading. I'd been dreading it because I knew it would force me to make a decision. Do I step down too and allow the group to fold? Or do I step up and have a go at leading this thing on my own. You know what, folks? I have to be totally honest with you. I wrestled with great feelings of total inadequacy, self-doubt, comparisons to previous leaders, and a general insecurity about whether I was actually up to the job. But one question above everything else that troubled me was this: what if I took on the leadership of the group that had flourished for 33 years at that time, and on my watch, it imploded? What would people think? What would I think? Could I come back from that? Worse still, I didn't even feel called to lead it on my own. And what was I to do with all of these emotions? I'm glad John Hibbets is here this evening. I'll tell you why. Because in 2000, when I was having this wrestle, without his help, encouragement, and support to have a go, and he was going to support me, I probably might not have done so. I salute you, sir. Thank you. But there was another significant moment in my wrestle. I had as good as made my mind up that I was going to take this role on. And I was in the men's loos at Tittersworth Reservoir. Wait for it. Then the door flung open, and one of my good friends who knew about my wrestle sort of fell through the door as I was washing my hands, and he said this. He said, "God calls us to be faithful, not successful." He closed the door, went off, and as far as I know, got on a plane. And God calls us to be faithful, not successful. And I'm not sure what the other guys in the cubicles who were attending to their business might have thought of that, but they got this young fella's voice shouting across the room, God calls us to be faithful, not successful. I realized that I'd been preoccupied with the wrong thing, really, that any real success that we enjoy as a youth group or as a church or any organization that's devoted to God is that any success comes from God, and we can't manufacture that, fake it, or make it happen in any way. God just calls us to play the part of the faithful servant, honoring him with our lives 7 days a week, and serving him using the gifts that God has given us to the best of our ability. And for a while after becoming the leader, I continued to wonder about this question, but do I feel called to do this job? Because I didn't, as it happened. And then one day, evangelist Bill Wilson, who some of you will know of, rolled into town. He runs or did at the time, runs the largest Sunday school in the world in New York City. And he came here, and I helped organize that event, privileged to do so as well. What a guy. He is a legend, and he came here. And he talked about the problem of people saying, well, I don't feel called to do this, that, or the other. And he was battling with this ministry of trying to ship in 20,000 kids into New York, into the center of New York, in a small arena they had, in those yellow school buses that you see on all the American high school films. And he was struggling with getting people to take on the job to do that because they were saying they didn't feel called. And he had this sort of breathy Brooklyn accent. And I remember he repeated the refrain time and time again. He said, sometimes the need is the call. Sometimes the need is the call. And I began to see, albeit retrospectively, that in meeting the need for someone to step up, actually I had answered the call. And God equipped me to do the rest, but not overnight, of course. It took a while. So I stepped up, Sean. I pressed on. And I enjoyed what I still describe as the best job at Swanbank for another 11 years before I stepped down and handed over to a younger fella. So that's how I became the leader of the group. So, Sean, I got to ask you a question, because you're sitting there smiling at me. Okay, tell us how you came to be a part of this group.
Brilliant. My first experience at Swanbank was, it was just before I was about to get onto this plane, and I gave this, just before I gave this, really significant message to this guy in his Tittersworth toilet.
He's good. He's good. Oh, that's a round of applause for that.
I've had like 5 minutes to think of that, so don't get worried about it.
Well, they were clearly listening.
My family here today, I sort of, they're sort of deeply in it, in how I came to the group, and one of the main reasons is sort of to do with like youth, which links in nicely to tonight, because we were like searching for sort of like a better youth, if you like, for me and my sister. Maybe that's not the reason, but as far as like, Mum's nodding. As far as I'm concerned, that's the reason. So we were searching for youth, because at the church that we were at before, I think they felt like they were losing us as Christians, and so we started our journey to find a new church. And I remember this one time we were like sat in the living room, and we did like the really risky thing where you like open the Bible and like it lands on a page and you read the passage. And they were like had some like really like amazing words from like God, and I just had like this most random like bizarre message ever. It was dead weird. But anyway, so that was in our process of like looking for churches. And then we came to Swan Bank one Sunday morning, and I suddenly started like here somewhere, and I was part of the service, and I was adamant I wasn't going to move to church, and I was like, yeah, this is all right. I'll sit here in this service, and I'll listen to it, but I ain't getting involved in any of this stuff, the youth stuff. And anyway, it came to like Sunday or Tuesday or whatever it was, the group, and Jessica was like, I'm going to Bible study or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, I'm going that. And anyway, Mum was like, all right, you can stay and do the dishes, and I was like, yep, I'm going. She's on by the door, and then ever since that, I've been like every week. It's ace. So that is sort of how I came to the group, and it's just an amazing group of people.
It is.
And just to dip into how it's helped me, is sort of over the years I've struggled a bit with my mental health, and having the group behind me and that like safety net, if you like, is wonderful. It's amazing. There's such a good group of people, and having those behind me to like sort of fall into is so helpful. Yeah, I love them all. And that's just how it's helped me without going into it too deeply, because I think I've only got about 2 minutes. So yeah, that's your why is ministry among young people important?
Why is ministry young? Oh, there we go. Oh, thanks. Among young people important. Okay, so I'll answer that, but first of all, I want to go back to that evangelistic mission when I was 7 years old. As part of that mission, I was handed a New Testament in which somebody had written part of an Old Testament verse from the book of Ecclesiastes. That's easy for you to say. And what it said in the front was, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Hold that thought for a minute. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Recently, I learned from a survey done by the Barna Group that 75% of Christians came to faith before they were age 21. 75% of Christians came to faith before the age of 21. Put that another way, folks, only about 25% of people become Christians after their 21st birthday. Now, of course, there are a million reasons why that might be the case. But in general, when you get older, life gets just more complicated. It gets more complicated. You might not think life is simple right now with A-levels and a partner to choose for the rest of your life and the rest of it, but as you get older, life does become a little bit more complicated. And King Solomon, who wrote that verse in Ecclesiastes, he didn't write it in my New Testament that I've just told you. I think that was somebody else. But King Solomon, who wrote that verse, where it said, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, he went on to say these words, and this is worth hearing. He said, remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come. Then he goes on to say, and you find no pleasure in them. Think about that for a minute. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come and you find no pleasure in them. Of course, some people do come to faith in their later years. But for many, those days of trouble that we've just referred to somehow squeeze out them ever coming to Jesus Christ. It's like those days of trouble rob them of that opportunity. Of course, I am not suggesting that we should give up trying to reach out to those who are over 21. I'm completely committed to that too. And my role here at this church, is very much along those lines. But if you commit yourself to Jesus Christ while you are young, you have your whole life ahead of you with which to make a huge difference. I was no Billy Graham at the youth group that I ran for all those years, but I did hope that I might see someone like him emerge from our youth group over the years. I was satisfied with not being the Billy Graham. I just wanted to see someone emerge from our group who was like him. And I have certainly seen some absolutely amazing young people go on to lead really fruitful ministries as committed Christians. I also have to say, and this is the sad part of being in ministry, that I have seen many, many more fall by the wayside over the years. My list of where are they now is a lot longer than the list of those who have gone into ministry or are leading a fulfilled and fruitful Christian life. And sometimes the thing that keeps me awake at night is not mistakes I might have made over the years, but the question, did I do enough? Did I do enough? And that is the sort of question I think that anybody who's involved in ministry at some point asks themselves. Anyway, it's best to start this race I keep referring to and to keep running it and to find fellowship in something like your Sunday night young adults that you've got right now. I want to tell you, folks, I'm speaking to you lot over there because mainly it is you lot we're here for tonight. There is nothing, I believe, absolutely nothing that beats doing this Christian life, as we call it, with people who are your own age, other young people. That you go through life together, praying together, you study the Bible together, you debate and argue together, you worship together, you evangelize together, you weep together, you do stupid things together, but not that stupid, Elliot. You laugh together, and you serve together. You do all of these things together as young people. There's nothing that will beat that. And it will never come back again. I've had my time as a young person. This is your time now, and I want you to make the most of it. And stepping out, as you have done here, to lead something like that will only help you along that road. In closing, I just want to put up a verse behind me, and I would like you, particularly the young folks, to keep your eye on that as I just close with this last little bit. And it's a well-known reading from 1 Timothy. This is the older man, Paul. I feel like an imposter in a youth service actually right now. But this is the older man, Paul, talking to his protege, Timothy. And I guess that analogy is pretty apparent right now. But he starts by reminding Timothy that no one should think that they can look down on him because he's young. Let us avoid doing that. Let us avoid looking down on young people just because they are young. But then he gives Timothy a charge. He charges him with these words. And folks, I charge you with them too. Because you don't just get away with the don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. There's a responsibility on your shoulders too, those of you who claim Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And the charge is this. It is, as it says up there, that you're to set an example in the way that you speak. You're to set an example in the way that you speak. You're to set an example in the way that you show love to others, in how you demonstrate your faith and your purity, and it includes sexual purity in that too. Notice that you are to devote yourselves to reading the Bible and to preaching and teaching if God has given you those gifts. No matter what gifts you have, the message is the same. Don't neglect your gifts. Don't leave them unused. Use them or lose them. Don't neglect the gifts that God has given you. Notice you are to be diligent and to watch your life really closely. You can't just do what you want all of the time. My dad, as I grew up, said, Gerard, it's not what you want to do, it's what you ought to do that counts. It's not what you want to do, it's what you ought to do that counts. You have to be diligent and watch your lives closely. And you have to persevere in that race. So that why, if you show us the last verse there, oh, it's there. If you persevere, you will save both yourself and others. I personally can't give you any better advice than the Apostle Paul. So may God bless you and all of you in your Sunday night young adults team.